Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 24th edition of the Sense and Sensibility lecture series. This year, our theme is Designing What Matters, People First, Better Places, and Shared Futures. As India marks 79 years of independence, this is also an opportunity for us to think about the kind of places and communities we want to build for the future, and more importantly, who we are designing them for. Aligned with this year's action area Aadhar, affordable design, a right. This edition of SNS looks at architecture as a tool for social transformation. Affordable design is not simply about designing at a lower cost. It's about creating places that are responsive to people who inhabit them, places that are inclusive, contextual, and rooted in the needs and knowledge of their communities. Through this conversation, we will explore how meaningful change can emerge through collaboration with communities, respect for existing neighborhoods, incremental development, and locally rooted approaches, rather than simply replacing what already exists. We couldn't find better speakers for today. Harshad Bhatia, Distinguished Professor of Acoustics and Design Chair at VESCOA, and an old friend, and architect Ruturaj Parekh, a younger friend, and the founder and director of Matter, as our two speakers for this edition. Ruturaj and me go back to when he was in college, and Harshad and I go back to, I think, my first quiz argument way back in 2002. This work offers valuable perspectives. Their work offers valuable perspectives on how architecture can contribute to more inclusive, equitable, and resilient places. We look forward to an insightful conversation on designing what truly matters, putting people first, creating better spaces and places, and shaping shared futures. Thank you for joining us for Sense and Sensibility 24.0.
Thank you, Akshita. So welcome everyone one more time to the 24th session of Sense and Sensibility, Designing What Matters, People First, Better Places and Shared Futures. On behalf of the Ethos Foundation, I want to extend my gratitude to our institutional partners for broadcasting this lecture today, Acharya NRV School of Architecture, Amity University, PSG Institute of Architecture and Design, School of Architecture, D.Y. Patil College of Engineering and Technology, BMS School of Architecture, Yelahanka, GZS School of Architecture and Planning, Muhammad Sadak AJ Academy of Architecture, Bharatiya Vidyapeeth College of Architecture, Pune, Jamia Millia Islamia College, Delhi, and Rathinam School of Architecture and Design at TIPS Global. Ethos Foundation's ongoing collaboration with the Rain Matter is both meaningful and significant, and this edition of Sense and Sensibility lecture series is a part of this continuing collaboration. Working closely across multiple initiatives, this association reflects a shared commitment to advancing climate action and embedding sustainability deeply within design education and practice. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little update on our initiative that we are running. So don't forget to take part in the Snap Studio Prompt 5, Affordable and Accessible Design, Good Jugaad Solutions. Document a local jugaad, redesign it to be a safer, durable, and affordable idea, and submit your entry. Participation is open to all. So please head over to the link that my teammate Priyanka will be pasting in the chat box right now for all the guidelines and how to register for the same. And before I introduce, we go to the next part of introducing the speaker, I would also like to let you know that we are giving away 1770 book to the best question in the Q&A round today. So while you are listening to our speakers, to our experts, please do ask your questions in the chat box, and we will be taking the questions up according to the time we have. Now to take us further, I would like to invite Kritika GK from PSG Institute of Architecture and Planning, Coimbatore, to introduce our first speaker for the day. Kritika, over to you. Priyanka, could you please help her unmute, I think.
Harshad Bhatia, urban designer and architect with gold medalist qualification, is also a noted writer, editor, academic, creative communicator, and a critical thinker based in Mumbai. Currently, he is a distinguished professor of acoustics and a design chair at Vivekananda Education Society's College of Architecture. His career includes work as a project architect with Charles Correa Architects, then established his own firm in 1986, and is now a hired brain solo practitioner. His writing has featured in dailies, professional magazines, and referred journals. He is a co-editor of J.K. Cement Architects of the Year Awards, book series 5 to date. Was the editor of the Journal of the Indian Institute of Architecture and a copy editor for the Book of Diverse Subject. He is the author of Becoming Hafiz Contractor, The Making of an Architect book, one of the best biographies published by the HarperCollins India 2019. I'm personally delighted to have the opportunity to learn from his experience and insights today. Please join me in warmly welcoming architect Harshad Bhatia.
Namaskar, thank you. Good morning. It's good to see some of the screens and many of the audience seeing it in a group session. I'll go straight to my presentation. I'll keep my video off so that the Wi-Fi works more smoothly. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Yes, Ashitji.
At the outset, I would like to thank our ASEG, ARCOS, Ethos Foundation, and Rainmatter for this opportunity. This is the 24th Sense and Sensibility lecture in 2026 now. The title given was Designing What Matters, People First, Better Places, Shared Futures. I find it very interesting because there are three words over here: people, place, and futures, which I actually want to really delve around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through an academician way of looking at things. Also, the way I would like to present it to you so that you're interested into what is being said. Rather than showing you the work, I want to get into some basic thinking questions which we need to do in these times of AI. The invite that came to me had these sentences: how architecture can prioritize people, strengthen communities, and create meaningful places through thoughtful, context sensitive design. The color is given by me on these texts. Offer valuable insights into designing with empathy, engaging with local realities, and demonstrating how architecture can become an instrument for positive social impact. It's very important to note that I'm going to delve around architecture primarily, but as an urban design approach. In response to the invite, the title I could think of was Inform, Involve, Implement. People can be involved only after they are informed. Once you involve them, you engage them, you implement it, and then enforcement becomes very valuable for us to see how we are able to control. Even civic sense needs to be a part of it. So we evaluate over time. So my response to the thing as a paragraph was: the presentation looks at resources that guide participatory planning, community contribution, and project assessment based on the parity potential of people, place, and purpose. Those three words, people, place, and purpose, are going to vary from place to place. And it will touch on possible methods, options of roles for the public to play, and designers to deliver from concept to completion. So I may be giving you a few books to really refer in terms of the titles, which become useful for us to really look at it from the point of view of community contribution and participatory planning. However, I decided to change the approach a bit because of the 25-minute time span, which is a good span. I need not have it longer than that because your registration becomes difficult. So I'm focusing on how public policy is actually being framed considering democratic participation. So there is legislation which also says you must have public participation. So nothing is outside the ambit and left to us as citizens only. Even within our legislation, there are ways in which, for example, inviting suggestions and objections. The first question I would like to raise as an accusation is which people. That word which is a one word question. Which? And when we use the word people, we are putting everything in one thing. We are generalizing every human to be the same. We got to be very careful about how we do that. So I'm going to take you through these ways in which we have looked at human settlements and we call them people places. Without people, it's space. With people, space becomes place. And I use the word settlements because we have started using terms like rural, urban. Although all of us are human, we are separating them due to certain characteristics. So there are three columns I'm doing here: indigenous, rural, and urban. If I look at it from the image point of view, if I ask you indigenous and what is the image that comes to mind, if I ask you for rural and urban, indigenous, I have something native which comes to mind. I don't use the word tribal. Indigenous is a better term. For rural, community comes to mind, and for urban, citizenry. Now, the words town and city are also different. They come under partly under rural and partly under urban also. So when I look at the image of the native, it is rooted, and what comes to mind as an image is a forest. When I look at rural countryside farming, urban planned and exchange. When I look at the aim of these three types, there's balance in the indigenous. You're living with nature, you're living according to your needs. In the urban situation at the extreme right here, you see is equilibrium. So there's a difference between the word balance and equilibrium because the urban situation is dynamic, it's always changing. Therefore, you're constantly evolving, you're building. When it comes to the rural, it is equitable. Your synonymity is with land, water, seasons, everything. So geographically also there's a difference between rural and urban. When you look at the focus of each of these, indigenous is restful. You only what you need for your daily this thing you try to take. You don't go beyond that. You don't need to store anything. You're living with nature, organic. Rural is seasonal, variations in climate, and cultivation becomes the aim, primary sector. Urban is production oriented, continuing and organizing oneself. And when I look at the traits, indigenous, minimalistic, blend with the natural environment, with all living things living together, there's contentment. Rural is agrarian economy, depending on climate and also availability of the you can say nourishment, etc. It's interconnected. And urban is advanced, and there's more than that. It's constantly changing. There's a lot of change happening in the urban situation. Therefore, when I'm going to give you a presentation today, I'm going to focus only on the urban because many a times we make this mistake by thinking about an indigenous community and then looking at how to approach it within the urban situation. This is where your site is something different and your site, actually the plot is something different. So I'm going to focus on the urban. In the is the most challenging situation for us architects. I normally use this slide to introduce urban design. Band design is what I say. What I show you is the plan of Greater Bombay on the left, which is the first development plan, 1967. And the one on the map on the right side is 2014 existing land use map. Band design. So I asked the question, who is missing here? When I use the answer, I say you are. And that you are is people. Urban design is all about people place. We need to look at it from this point of view because without people, your urban design cannot be possible. You're not looking at it only from an ecology point of view. Man being a part of nature is important. To give you another example, there's the raindrop and then there's the ocean. So the raindrop is the human scale, family group scale. And the ocean is the humans, the plural, the collective, everybody, the entire planet population is the largest settlement. So our journey has always been from architecture to planning. So architecture, you limit it normally to family group. Planning, you go up to the collective level. Now, these are the two extremes, from one beginning to the other ending. Urban design is like the river, which connects the two. And this is where the community scale comes into the picture. So when you talk of community contribution, you are generally looking at an urban design scale project. And the best part about this is that it's like the river. It doesn't need to build bridges because it is touching both the banks at the same time. One bank is the past, the other bank is the future, and urban design is all about the present. So urban design projects generally fructify within 3 to 5 years, whereas planning projects take 20 years as per legislation, and architecture takes the shortest time because the family wants to move in as soon as possible. Planning is generally 2D, architecture is 3D. Urban design, there's a fourth dimension, the dimension of time. That's the most important aspect. So as students of architecture, even when you do your studios within your college for the architectural design projects, have you ever given a thought to by which date would your building be up and ready and given possession to the occupant? We are missing out on that element of time in our academic exercises. Once I know that time is also a constraint, my concept can revolve around the type of technology I can use to deliver the project. Urban designer perception is to take a distanced view of the closed part, macro to micro, and a closer look of the distant whole, micro to macro. What does this mean? In space and time. So if I'm doing a planning project, once I've done my collective proposal, I need to go down to the human scale. So I'm seeing architecture seen with the planning lens and planning seen with the architecture lens. So urban designer looks from part to whole and goes back to the part, as well as looks at the whole, then goes to the part and comes back to the whole. So any project that we do as an architect, being an urban designer, we are doing something for the client indeed. But at the same time, we are also looking at the immediate environment and the collective environment of the development plan within which my site is placed. This question of which people is very important because within the urban environment, you find variety of types of people. I am using a presentation over here where I'm relying on only my keyboard. So I'm seeing this as a smiley. And these are the figures I'm going to use to make you understand what I mean over here in terms of the type of people. So these are the characters. The cast is the pink and the blues are the citizen family. The light blue and the light green is the migrant squatter labor. The yellows are the notable citizens, and the red is the media. And therefore, because I'm using this as from the keyboard, I'm calling it an emoticon fable. Once upon a time, in the port city of Bombay, came settlers, stayed in their houses, and this was much before we had vehicles. So there was a dirt track road from which one was able to move around. Within a few years, the family grew, the house became smaller, the dirt track road remained, but the stilt area, which was used for play and gatherings, started becoming a parking area because vehicles had started coming into the city. With the vehicles coming into the city, it was required that the dirt track road was made into a pakka road, what we call a tarred road or a concrete road today. And therefore, labor was brought in, and the labor was given temporary huts to live in. As time went by, the road work continued, and we finally had the pakka road. This is what happens when we have labor coming in from outside. The temporary huts became a hutman colony. Migrants also became a family. The city was a pull initially, but today the city seems to become a push. I mean, a pull from the rural side where there's a push. So if you want city development, start looking at the rural areas around it also. Unfortunately, jurisdiction-wise, our development plans are limited to the administrative limits of the planning authority. Seeing that the hutman colony was growing, the formal citizens' houses became almost inconspicuous, and the notable citizens, which means the government and the glamour industry, who could influence views, started giving a look at it. Seeing that, we suddenly had the media coming and reporting that there is something going to happen regarding to these hutments. So the media coming into the picture, there had to be some sort of a proposal to take care of the city now, not let it go into a hutman colony at the city scale. So there was the policy which came in, which talked about new housing policy, free rehab and sale houses. And you notice that the formal houses of the earlier times were getting almost invisible, and the development was taking place in a manner where your policy kept on asking for more because every election you started giving more free areas. So your carpet area increased from 180 square feet to 225 to 269 to 300 and 350 now. In the end, we are ending up with this situation where we are forced to do nothing but just go high because even our parking has become free of FSI. and we need more parking. So this is the transformation that you're seeing in the city. So which people are we giving attention to over here? In 1996, as editor of the Journal of IIA, I thought of this situation because the slum problem in Bombay was going to get worse. So there was a policy which came. So first there was a sum, that means there was value for land and it was priced because it was neat, clean, well maintained. Then you came the colonies which became a slum, and then there was a slump in the market. So how do you now get rid of this situation? But remember, the editorial over here, the first sentence I said at that time was squat and low, ugly, but a must is the reality of the slum today. This is 1996. A must because they were also contributing to the city's economy, though indirectly, because they were making things affordable for the formal sector. However, what happened? The policy took a different turn. It looked at slum as a disease, but slum is a physical condition. It is a symptom. It is not the disease. The policy is trying to cure a symptom, but the disease still remains. So we got to understand that slum is not a type of use. The use could be residential, commercial, social, it could be any of the other land uses, but the condition in which people are living is the slum. We need to eradicate the slum by trying to find out the root cause of it. We look at the policy today and we find that there were various options earlier, but the policy is framed with this intention. So I'm showing you this one, four quadrants over here, plus plus on the extreme right on top, minus minus on the extreme left below. The vertical axis is my age of the people, and the horizontal axis is the socio-economic and the status income sector. So EWS goes on the extreme right, and HIG today is ultra HIG will goes on the extreme right and sorry left for EWS. And you look at the age wise. So now what are we seeing in the city today? Majority of the population is living in situations called slums, dilapidated buildings and chawls, and over 50% population is around 25 years. Minority, minuscule, is in the top right hand one, but that is the most aware population. It is the affording, it is resourceful, it is influencing, and it is approving. So these two quadrants become the main quadrants for us to frame the policy on. And this is what I noticed, that the policy is framed on certain criteria. The vote bank, which is place investing, and you have the voice bank, where the media gives attention to that, and it is space investing. So you got people on the bottom right this thing, and you got people on the top this thing. The other two are generally like the middle income group. We don't get hurt. We have to live with what the policy says. So what has happened in the city? There's a thin red line between what is called legal, ethical, and moral, and at the same time, illegal, parasitic. You're not contributing, you're taking, and hooliganistic, dadagiri, for example. This thin red line today has taken its own entity. What I start calling is encroachment authorized, fact above law, very important aspect of participatory planning, and recognized illegal. So now you have a policy which is allowing the Hutman colony to be redeveloped, which makes sense from the humanitarian point of view. However, what are the options before us? So instead of which being the only one word question, there are so many other one word questions which come up. Who, why, what, where, when, and how. The policy looks at only giving housing to the informal sector. The whole point over here is that when you look at the stakeholders in the city, from residents, citizens, public to NGOs, and more, there are so many ways in which you look at each one having their say as a stakeholder to influence policy. So how do we do this? How do we resolve this situation, which was something public participation could have done through stakeholder analysis? So if we go ahead with stakeholder analysis, remember stakeholder is one word. There is no space between stake and holder. I'm giving you a different sector this now. So when you look at the plus plus and you look at the minus minus, you've got low influence, low interest, high influence, high interest, and then you've got high influence, low interest, and low influence high interest. So this is These are the interests and influences for policy. So when a public policy is being made, when you do the understanding as a stakeholder analysis, participatory planning is happening. But attention is given to the high influence, high interest first, then low influence, high interest after, then high influence, low interest, and the least is the bottom left. So there you have the crowd, you have the players on the top right, you have the those who are totally indifferent, the crowd, you've got subjects on the left, and you've got setters and defenders. So these are the ways in which you look at your stakeholders. According to each of those, you put them in this, and then you realize who do you need to involve at what in comes up the framing the policy. So crowd, what do? You need limited involvement and monitoring and unlikely to be focus of policy reform process. So the vote bank is being used rather than it is being involved. They are not informed, they are just made to be involved because of certain situations. The players are the ones who are actually influencing the policy. So you have over here the subsidizing part where you have a sale component. So the players are looking at the policy as a sale component. The crowd is just given the free this thing so that the area of the sale can increase. The subjects require participation. So subjects are the ones who are normally rooted in that community. They stay over there. Whereas the fourth quadrant, the setters are the one who are not rooted in the community. They don't stay there, but they can actually skew the policy design and they become a killer risk, like from outside talking about somebody else's location and saying that it should come up because it helps me. I don't stay there. So the subjects get affected with that sort of a decision. So what do we do when we frame the policy? What I notice is we manage closely with the players. They are the resource persons. We keep satisfied the local community. We keep informed the ones who are outside that, but we actually monitor the ones with the least effort. So how do you monitor it? Why you don't have a role to play over there is you say you're getting a free house, you don't have a say in the policy. So this becomes a big problem for us to really look at it in terms of how legally we are doing public participation, but it is not giving us that what you say satisfaction at the city scale, which needs to work in equilibrium. So the promoters, apathetics, latents, and defenders. You got to really see that all your stakeholders are managed carefully. Coming to the slums itself. So we had slumming, we had slamming, and we had slimming. These are the three approaches to looking at slum removal. So the first was always slum removal. There were eviction and they were bulldozed down. Then humanitarian wise, let them be upgrading it, relocation, sites and services. These are the approaches which were taken to self-improvement. And then comes this one policy which actually almost wipes out the top five options. Slum redevelopment. Because in this you get a free house and there's somebody else who's going to pay for it. We started romanticizing the slum as something which you could even see as having contribution to the city in some way. So slum tourism becomes important. Now the problem here is in public participation for this situation, we are not removing the slum condition. So there is no policy which talks about slum prevention. So if you ask me to give you an answer for that, that the moment we did slum redevelopment as a policy, there should have been a cutoff date to say that by 2020, the slum rehabilitation authority will also cease to exist, because you've got enough time to see that the slums are no longer there and we don't want any new slums. But we are continuing this, unfortunately. And with more slums coming up, we have created a monster and we are busy feeding it. As architects, this is a question I want you to see. What you're seeing is the whole, the entire part. As an urban designer, I want you to go into the architectural level of that. And what you start seeing is something different. So this is a graphic way of trying to make you understand that the slum house today, if this is a colony of hutments, each hut is a different design. Within each hut, there are different doors. They may be picked up, whatever it is, but there's a lot of choice over here. There are lots of options. There's a lot of mix and match. There's a lot of jugaad. You don't have to design it with the same sort of a situation. But when we are designing today with rehab in mind, what do you see? Architecture can influence society. What do you see over here? These are the, in my view, these are the rehab buildings. Where is that mix? Where is that variety? We are going, taking the house through the shredder, and we are just doing copy, 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 copy. So you are differentiating between humans themselves. That there is one set of humans who are being housed in an architecture which looks like they are rehab, and there's another set of humans which are coming to buy a place, and they've been given more attention in the design of the house. Is there some way, can we as architects also see that we don't differentiate between the humans who are getting a free house and the ones who are getting a sale? Because your sale component value can also go up if you're designing keeping in mind the inhabitants which are already there. So there is monotony being created. The whole point is there's also a monopoly. So the entire policy, while talking of public participation, seems to have shifted attention to just putting it on paper that yes, we have a stakeholder analysis. But at the end of the day, as architects, we are playing to the monopoly of looking at it from the sale point of view. So when I put that graphic together, this is the sheet that I had made to give you an understanding. On the left is what you see is the variety, the options possible. People options, they are not architect design. And architects are coming and putting everything in one uniform look. Where is our creativity? Keep it in mind that this is a different form of public participation, but we need to get involved. So this is not the end. When I use say the end, I mean the purpose, the means to an end. So I'm going to take you through a few resources which I find useful. Urban design is about making connections. This was the first book which I referred when I was doing urban design. And connections is for everyone concerned with the quality of community life, architects, planners, educations, government representative artists, and people who live and work in communities. This book is not available readily today, but it gives you observations of 10 communities in the US, and the author has actually given how he got involved and how the entire connection between members. So if you see the presentation I have done, I have tried to make connections into terms of symptom, disease, etc., trying to find out what is happening where. This is a very interesting book, the Community Planning Handbook, how people can shape their cities, towns, and villages in any part of the world. This book is particularly interesting from the point of view of looking at it that there are so many methods given in the book. I'm not going to read this out, but if you can get a hold of this book, it's a good resource which can guide you according to the type of project that you're handling. This is the format of the 2 pages inside the book. It gives you different methods, A to Z, different scenarios, A to Z, and the glossary of terms. This is very vital for us to understand because we cannot have a one size fits all approach for even our development control regulations. The unified DCPR seem to be doing that in the state of Maharashtra. Have you realized that? That at the end of the day, our local fabrics will start looking the same. So you'll have the geography of nowhere. We need to understand that similar to that, even community participation contribution varies from place to place and people to people. This is a term very commonly used nowadays, placemaking. It's something which always existed, but it never had a name. Now we have a name to it. That's what this says, okay, this book. But in addition to this, is a very interesting place check users guide, which has got over 100 questions which you can ask in the community that you're looking at in terms of improvement. So if I look at a place check guide and if I go to the slum, I immediately realize that there is a quality of options within the existing. So if you're left leaving it to people, so architecture without architects, they will start looking at it in a different way. There's economy also involved over there. There's also social synonymity, not anonymity. In the apartment block, there's social anonymity, which is a trait of being urban. So a lot of the good qualities, one of the futures, is also getting wiped out. So I'll end with this book, Architect Verb. It's a very interesting book, and there's one chapter on placemaking where he starts by saying no entry found. It's not here nor there or there. No entry found in any dictionary. And I end by saying thank you.
Thank you so much for that insightful presentation, Harshit ji. It was very nice to see how dynamically you told the story of Mumbai while raising fundamental questions about equity, housing policy, and even how, what, where of the building. It was really interesting to see that, and I'm sure that it has inspired the students to think critically about all of these points. So, so we will be taking the questions up after the next presentation. So I'd request you to be present while we go to the next. So I would like to now invite Vanisha from Acharya's NRV School of Architecture, Bangalore, to introduce our second speaker for the day.
Pruthraj Parikh is the founder and director of Matter, an interdisciplinary architecture and curatorial practice. Pruthraj has served as director of the Charles Correa Foundation, where he led architecture, urban design, planning, and social projects, along with public forum initiatives. Matter, his Goa-based practice, works on architecture and urban design projects, research initiatives, and curatorial projects. Matter's work lies in interface between architecture and content, consistently experimenting with new ways of engaging with the built environment. Since its establishment, Matter has designed and executed architecture projects of multiple scales and typologies in diverse contexts. Matter's work emerges and responds to the incredible potential of India's diverse and plural landscape. The firm was awarded Lexus Design Award for Architecture in 2020 and 2 JK Cement Architect of the Year's Award, regional category, and public architecture in 2024 and 2025. Since 2021, Rutraj Parikh and Manasi Hattangadi have curators for Artshila Ahmedabad and Artshila Goa, multi-art spaces established and founded by Artshila Trust. And with that, I'm very excited to hear from him and explore the ideas, questions, and perspectives he brings to today's conversation. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to architect Rutraj Parikh.
Thank you, Vanisha. Thanks, Ethos, Ramya, Geeta, everybody at the foundation for this invitation. I also want to thank Harshad for that uh, sort of context-setting deep dives into how we view people, especially who shape the city, and what is our sort of role um, uh, in this large, seemingly uncontrollable kind of urban realm. Um, I have taken some screenshots, in fact, Harshad, from your presentation. Just, uh, you know, remind myself of some wonderful diagrams that you have showed, and to share them with my office. So I hope that is okay. I wanted to. I'll quickly uh, deep dive right into the presentation. Um, just a little bit about our practice. Today's presentation is called typological experiments. And the reason why I'm calling it typological experiments is because of uh, the kind of work that we do is a lot of it is about questioning convention, and we are an architecture and urban design practice typically. So we do offer professional services for clients who want to build, for private clients, institutions, NGOs. But what I'm going to share today is like a thin slice of our work which deals with the public domain in alignment with the theme and the discussion of today's gathering. I and Harshad also share one small um, biographical kind of overlap with Charles Correa. I think Harshad worked with Charles. I was director of his foundation in Goa for almost 3 years. And he is the reason why we moved to Goa in the first place. we had really no plans and no connection to this land. So we moved here, we became a part of this small diagram um, that we had drawn of the foundation building in Pantenas hangs on our studio wall till date, and a lot of our work, especially in the public domain, is influenced by how Charles used to think about the public domain. My work at the foundation involved um, public projects and initiatives, workshops that looked at the urban uh, conditions in Goa. Goa has a very unique environmental and urban situation. Um, the foundation also did a lot of work in what Charles used to say demonstration projects. And I'm going to share one of them, which influenced me a lot and which continues to influence me till date. As a foundation, we were asked to look at the condition of Anganwadis. And Goa has more than 1,200 Anganwadis for a small state. So you can imagine the problem for larger states like Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Karnataka. And these Anganwadis typically cater to kids between 2 and 6, and they operate out of premises which look like this. They are run down, they have kind of some shops, they are very low rent, spaces that people generally are trying to look for people to occupy, and then they do this kind of makeshift thing. Kids are put into it, and it's then there are hazards, malaria, snake bites, etc. So one of the things that we did as the foundation is to study how these conditions are, create a sort of ground report on, and this is a very small area out, selected for this pilot. And we created this kind of forms in which people would go to these different sites and then record information, and we taught the Anganwadi workers and helpers to make plans of their spaces in Excel. They had access to Excel at that time, and some of these plans are drawn by people who send them to us along with this form that they fill. This overall survey led us to believe that rather than designing every individual piece of Anganwadi, we can create a model that the state can then kind of take it on themselves to replicate. And a report was created which outlined, it was like a kit of parts kind of report which outlined how to design an Anganwadi. And Charles was very inclined to do one demonstration project, to show how this report is effective on the ground. So we asked for a site, and we were given this very small parcel of land just next to a collapsed but still alive rain tree. And Sachin Akshikar, who was at that time working with Charles, led this design project through the foundation. And the diagram of it was very clear that the usable spaces will occupy corners, and this amorphous center will become a space where children can be free to, run around, frolic, engage with the materials. Beautiful logo was designed. And I'll skip the process and show you what the demonstration project looks like, and this was the kind of space that was ultimately created. And it had this, just like the diagram, a beautiful central space filled with light and air. And the critical spaces like the kitchen and the washrooms and all occupy the corners. This was a great learning for us at the early stage of our practice, especially because we wanted to engage with public projects. Our practice deals with architecture and curatorial projects. We design buildings and we do urban design. We also engage with curatorial projects in the form of books, journals, seminars, exhibitions, etc. When one of the earliest projects we had was to design an NGO working out of Bangalore wanted to create a small product that can be made out of recycled Tetra Pak. They work with women who clean this Tetra Pak. Tetra Pak are very difficult to recycle. So you have to kind of find a second use for all the discarded Tetra Pak. And they flatten them and they create these large sheets. And we thought it would be wonderful if we can create a small birdhouse. The Tetra Pak is something that survives the climate, and the birdhouse was designed in a way that it collapses and goes into an envelope, so it's easy to ship for people who would buy it from the interior. And it's a very small, big surface development. And as soon as you insert the bird stick, it kind of stiffens and becomes like structural. And this initial experiment led us to a few early projects, our engagement with low-cost public housing. This particular one I wanted to share today because this was also done on behest of Ethos. Ethos was the convener and the organizer of this housing competition for Indira Awas Yojana, and to reimagine the houses that people make for themselves through Indira Awas Yojana. And what we proposed is that the most important part of rural housing is a room. If people have a room, the balance house is sort of incrementally made. And the room can be a part of this sort of 100 each through India. So every family gets 100 meters square kind of land allocated to build a house on. And each room can just occupy a 25 meters square kind of footprint. How this works is by creating this site services kind of layout where you have this series of rooms, and these rooms can be built by people themselves through a certain financial aid. We realize that the issue of rural housing is an issue of ingredients more than recipes. So we are trying to figure out how to enable people to make this room and have access to land. And slowly we realize that they will build for themselves as and when they have resources. And this room then has to be flexible enough to expand, to connect, to create a bit of domicile around the room. And it looks, what does this housing look like? It looks like this, any um, Indian village is constantly under development. People are constantly changing their houses, adding a floor, extending something here, adding a staircase, putting something on top. And this whole, our rural sort of landscape is constantly in flux. Through multiple stages, we also realize that this kind of central kitchen houses, which have these concrete slabs and all, are very inflexible. You need certain things like the roofs, especially, which can be dismantled so that you can add a floor, and the same roof can then go on the first level, etc. And our proposal involved very simple ideas. And the focus was to deliver that single room that people can build for themselves. There's a small video there, but I won't go into it. It's sort of I have 25 minutes. I'm mindful of that. But the idea was to kind of generate these multiple opportunities for people in the villages to build for themselves, rather than us as architects, designers, or as central planners deciding what they need and then creating a central kitchen from which we serve houses. Our engagement with this landscape in Bihar started with an NGO that our client, one of our commercial clients, run. They run this beautiful organization in rural Bihar called Parivartan. And because they run this organization, people keep coming to them for small interventions, small projects. There was this one old well, which was discovered in a village close by. And the myth was that this well was about more than 100 years old, which may be true. We realized that the bricks which were used in the well were certainly pre-independence. And but our intent through all our public projects is to kind of find a backdoor to create a small public space. Somehow the idea of public space is central to our work. So we said, yes, we will recharge the well, we'll clean the well, we'll renovate the surroundings, but we'll also make this small intervention, which serves as a place for people to come, gather, sit, talk, find a place in evenings for women and elderly and children to play around. So the well, as you can see here, the way how it was discovered slowly became the center of this little development. We used everybody from the context to create this kind of a simple and bricklaying is a fantastic skill that a lot of masons all over Rajmistris come from Bihar. So this is in their blood. So we used a single material in two qualities. We used a better quality brick to do the lining and the regular quality brick to kind of repair and restore the well. The old well, the bricks of the old well were just cleaned up and put back to the well. And the sort of it was desilted. We found the aquifer was started coming in, and we were able to create this small space. So it went from something like this, which was the condition in which this well was discovered, to something like this, which is now like a small fulcrum for people to assemble. A few small projects that uh, came next as the consequence of this little intervention was this shrine, which has a lot of significance for this particular village. But being, not being believers as we are, we didn't want to create something very iconoclastic because we didn't want the shrine to have an outrightly religious presence. But we thought that, and you remember the Anganwadi, right? And right next to the shrine was a small room where an Anganwadi used to function. So we thought that, what if we make again a small public space on the behest of intervening in this shrine, and just create a nice platform to connect these two buildings. And we tried to get a few little more funding from our supporter organization to also just paint and to make the Anganwadi and the room next door clean, and then create this little space. So the shrine went from being that to this. And again, it serves as a place for people to gather and serves as a little informal sort of community space, let's say. Then we were approached by an organization which sets up just one second. There's this kind of no man's land on either side of the highway where weekly market sits, again in rural Bihar. And we were asked if we can, because they sit on the ground and the transaction happens. And these weekly markets are very important because a few villages around this little fulcrum, they all gather to do their weekly shopping from this market. This market sits twice a week in the same place. And all the vendors keep traveling to different villages. And the site is just this kind of open field. And what we were trying to do is to give some respectable definition to how the market operates. So we thought that we'll create something very simple and modular because there is no electricity or water connection in this space. So it needs to be very light, very airy. It needs to protect people from harsh sun and rain, very rains. And it has to be built at a very small budget. So we thought that what if we use reinforcement bars and create this simple space frame, because the space frames are very stable, and use just the kind of corrugated sheet roof and create a platform so that the transaction is easier and that the produce can be put in a way that it does not get dirty, does not interact with the. And just to make an envelope, we thought, again, in the spirit of everything else, we were designing that we just create this screen around so that the market has an enclosure, but it's not cut off. The module then obviously expands and repeats itself. Throughout the whole process of development and construction, the market still used to operate in this space. So every Wednesdays and Sundays, we used to stop work on site, and the market used to sit. So we used to get live feedback on the project, because people used to keep commenting on, oh, this is not working, this is not working, and like that. And as you can see, the brick screen that enables us to just create a quiet enclosure, but it still connects with the context, that's the trees, and very easy to maintain. You can see the houses and the shrines and the temples in the neighborhood connect back. We are not cutting them off visually. Very simple piece of architecture. And this big banyan tree became the center of the whole market space, and everything got organized. As I mentioned, throughout construction, we had to make space because their livelihoods are connected. So we had to stop work 2 days a week, and then as the market sits, and the other 6 days when we make the building. At the very end, the people from the village said, "Oh, we need a clock tower because a lot of places have a clock tower." So we obliged. We said, "Okay, sure, we'll include a clock tower." This is how the final space looks like, and this is sort of typical market day. It's very busy, but it just creates a better environment for everybody to make this transaction happen. That's the nature of the site. So just like this sort of no man's land on either side of the highway. We are involved with the city of Panjim for a Pan City Mobility Plan. And I mean, this is a very in-depth project, but I just wanted to skim over it just to share what is involved in creating a plan like that. One of the things that we did is we studied the densities and the existing bus routes. And we wanted to create a system that is time-based and not distance-based, so that we tried to understand where are all the people going in the morning, where are the central office areas, where are the residential areas, and how the city behaves, and propose the 6 bus loops that overlap and complement the entire system. And there are some routes like that hack through the system. So this is the overall comprehensive map of how this is done, like the London Underground map resembles how people would navigate cognitively the whole city. And these are all the bus stops on this route. And as you can see, there are many interchanges. So you can jump the line if you want to. And because now the system is time-based, not distance-based, you can do it very easily. And each route has this sort of a map. There are a lot of one-ways where the buses go in one direction. We work with the stakeholders. This is like almost 20, 22, 23 agencies, including the city corporation and 3 panchayats. This is the urban outline of Panjim extends into 3 village panchayats. And we created this sort of we helped create this. We had an advantage of other consultants and government agencies who were very experienced in dealing with public transport. And each map was then generated as an incremental, as an idea of going from the smallest and the most sort of traffic intensive area to larger loops which are less intense and have demands of less frequency. We are also engaged with designing the infrastructure along the bus routes. And we have created this sort of a very simple modular system so that each of these bus stops can be built in a workshop and then just placed wherever required, starting from a flag to the smallest one to how it starts adopting based on the traffic that in that particular bus stop. Was the you have to take care of the accessibility, certain conditions where you don't get straight footpaths, and how to execute it in an existing scenario. We look at a lot of these kind of urban nodes where the new bus stops have to function, how these nodes can be connected across the streets. We can jump the buses going in either directions and create safe pedestrian first sort of. These are the 157 bus stops on the whole system. And as you can see, the study uh, recommends which bus lines from which. So all 7 loops are violet, indigo, blue, green, orange, red. And the graphics are also designed by us. And how these graphics then influence the way they are read in physical infrastructure around the city. These are just a few of those examples of how these bus stops are now manufactured and placed on site. The last project that I want to share is a beautiful small library. We were approached by, not approached, I mean, it was sort of a open call by Serendipity Arts Foundation for a library. And Serendipity Arts, they do this beautiful arts event every year in Belgium. And as a part of the event, they set up a library. But the issue is that children, and this library is basically for children, but children don't really read books the way adults do. They don't sit on chairs and tables and read books. They need a space where they are freer. So what we thought was that rather than putting the library in a room, let us put it out in the forest among the trees and do a very simple design where you have an enclosure, but you're not cut off from the environment around. And the circle and the square, both forms which are very relatable to children, then get deconstructed into this sort of canopy and enclosure in the forest. We found this little clearing next to the river, and we proposed we place the library there. And every day they have some book readings, book releases, some small plays where children get engaged. So then this little thing here becomes a part of that. People sit around, and even if you don't want to, you're halfway there, you are bored, you can quietly escape, without disturbing the. That's our son, and that he was 1.5 at that time. So he was one of the first users of the space. We realized it's working, because he quite enjoyed it. And as the library was set up by this wonderful organization called Bookworm, who work with rural libraries across Goa, and they occupied the whole space. And then there was like tons of children. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ruturaj. That was an incredibly inspiring presentation. The way, I mean, all your projects, the entire journey from the Anganwadi to this Red library space, it's really such a rich look at the process that you follow, and the kind of projects also, I think, is what stands out. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your insight and vision with us today. And with this, the presentations are over, and we would like to move on to the Q&A round. So we have few questions that has come in the chat box, as well as there was a Google form floated initially, uh, for us to gather some questions as well. So I would like to invite my teammate Priyanka to moderate the Q&A session. And yeah, that's over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you, Ramya. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be moderating today's question answer session. We've received a wide variety of thoughtful questions over a Google form that was circulated earlier from students and participants across institutions in India and beyond. Some questions are directed towards a specific speaker, while the others touch on themes that both our speakers can respond to. We'll also be giving a copy of the 1770 A Walk for Our Cause book to the two best questions from today's session. So don't hold back, share your thoughts and questions in the chat box. So yeah, let's get started. Over to the first question. So we have a question in the chat from Dharma Priya. It's to both our speakers here. The question is, our city streets are underplayed without any concerns for the people. Now, inclusive streets are also just a statement. Why and how can we transform this? Yeah. Harshit or Rutraj? Yeah, you can go first.
I think, Ruturaj, your work is very interesting. The difference between my approach and yours is I'm looking at the city, you're looking at the areas where you're more horizontal. So the challenge in the city is different. So it's a very, what do you say, pertinent question about the streets. My whole take on this is that we need to have civic sense also. Many a times we've got proper streets, but we don't have the proper mindset. And I think people also need to understand that if there is a pavement, walk on the pavement. If it's not encroached, then it's obviously meant for you to walk on. But we find people loitering on the street also. So it's something which I would look at from the place point of view, from which location you're talking of, because it's a very generalized question. It's very difficult for us to say yes, it'll work everywhere. I find it difficult to see. Maybe give you an example. If you go to Hiranandani Pawai, only the Hiranandani complex area, you find that the streets are well maintained, well looked after, the payments are there, people also follow the rules. So if you give me an example, like over there something is happening, I can think about how to go about solving that issue. So I think sometimes our questions need to be very focused, because like I said, people are different, places are different, and the parity is also different, the what we have over here. So like Ruturaj's kit of parts is a very good idea for housing where you have land, and where you're not building one above the other. So how do you do that? So this is a second question which I notice is for me very, very relevant question. Can I go to that? Ruturaj, you want to talk about the streets first?
No, but yeah, I think our experience on working with the streets is this mobility project that we shared. And I think one of the issues that we have, especially, is that we still are in and stuck in an imagination where the car has tremendous primacy, and the vehicle, like the car has somehow in the imagination of all planners the absolute right of way everywhere. That fundamental uh, kind of problem of imagination is what uh, you know impairs a lot of people from creating better infrastructure for pedestrians and for public transport as well. So if I think we still have this huge aspirational uh, idea that everybody should own a car at some point and should drive one, but it's clearly leading us to a place where there's very little then left for the pedestrians and for people who use public transport, which is actually a large, an enormously large majority. So once you flip that imagination, then suddenly you realize that you no longer have to design for the car, and the car becomes, in fact, a huge burden for the streets. I mean, look at Bombay. The entire city to the water edge is now planned for the car, and um, the even some of the older parks and pedestrian infrastructure that had access to water is now completely cut off by this high speed traffic. So yeah, once the car is goes out of imagination, which is a matter of few years because it will going to be quite unaffordable to own a personal vehicle. Then maybe the streets will start changing for better. It is already happening in certain parts of the country where the planners have consciously moved forward in the favor of pedestrian sort of first kind of imagination of streets. Pune being one good example.
Yeah. I think her main question is how to transform. Am I right, Dharmapriya? Yeah. We normally look at pedestrian as a mode of transport. The reality is that all of us are pedestrians, including the car driver. Because you have to get out of that vehicle and you got to walk to your wherever you need to go. So we cannot look at pedestrian as a mode of transport along with the others. So how to transform is to raise this awareness that look, you have one of the best cars in the world, but you also are a walker. You understand? We need to really look at it from this point of view that pedestrians are not to be compared with any of the other modes because all the modes have pedestrians. And I think we need to really start raising awareness about how we look at, because getting to the crux of the problem is the most important thing, that sometimes the solution lies in the problem itself. And since Ruturaj mentioned about cars being this thing, we cannot avoid cars also. So if you've seen that one graphic, I'm sure all of y'all have seen that one graphic which shows pedestrians standing on the street, on the road, bunched together. Then there's a private cars, so the entire road is chock-a-block with cars. And then the third one is the bus. The problem with this graphic is that it's only talking about how much space you can save. Whereas we are actually talking, the issue is about mobility. It is not about space. So if I talk about mobility, then I have a best choice I have to go from door to door is by walking. But if I look at the time constraint, I don't have that time. So I need to use the car. You understand? So the car also gives me door to door. The bus doesn't do that. I have to go to the bus stop. I have to take the bus. I have to get up at the bus stop and go somewhere I have to go. So the bus, this space comparison is looking at in the wrong way. You need to look at mobility, not space. So somewhere you need to have roads. It need to be this thing. But when you put enemy number one as car compared to the pedestrian, you have to tell the driver that, look, Baba, aap bhi utarne wale ho, aap bhi chalne wale ho. I don't know how this will translate in the transcription, okay? So I think how to transform is to first raise awareness that we are all pedestrians. Every human is a pedestrian. Even if you're with a walking stick or a wheelchair or a pram, you're still a pedestrian. And I think once we raise that awareness, then transport planners need to understand that they cannot put that pedestrian as another mode comparison with the others, because everybody who comes out of the other modes are pedestrians. That is one way in which I would look at it. So getting into the focus to the crux of the issue here is about movement. And civic sense is one thing we lack a lot. I always believe 10% is design, 20% is the actual execution based on the design with quality control, 30% is civic sense and enforcement, and 40% is maintenance and upkeep. So our paper projects are only 10%. If they are not executed properly, that 20% gets wiped out. If we don't have civic sense, there's no point in giving a footpath. The point is people will still say footpath है लेकिन मुझे road पे चलना है because ये मेरा right है कि मैं किधर भी चल सकता हूँ. I think we need to inculcate civic sense also. So when we say people which area, which locality, type of people, etc. And the other thing is about vendors. Informal markets have always been a part of our Indian culture. Our planning is top down. It has come from the West. So we have started looking at road sections without informal sector in them. So the human scale is missing in the planning of the city. Planners plan the city, citizens negotiate it. So that's the thing. Is something you want to add, Ruturaj, or should we go to the next question?
Yeah, we
It's a
can
very
go to the
valid
next.
question.
No, we can go to the next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is from Dr. Ripu Daman Singh. Excellent question. We could very well see that repetition has been normalized by us architects while designing apartments for people who are extremely diverse. What would be your message for budding architects who will be entering into the profession at a time when this repetitive type of work is increasing all the more? Okay, remember, repetition means there's numbers. If you have sound business sense in your fourth year housing studio or whenever you're doing housing projects of this type in your college, don't give me only one option of the type of house that you're designing. Give me 5 to 10 options. If I say 1 bedroom hall kitchen, 10 options. If I say 2 bedroom hall kitchen, 10 options. We end up doing one and therefore we cause this repetition. So you give me 10 options of each design and try to give me the density. So somewhere, even if I think about a low-rise courtyard house where the density is the lowest, but I've got a ground hugging structure, whatever I may be losing in the built-up area there, I try to do with a ultra high-rise. So I'm looking at a balanced approach to consuming what is the potential of the site. But we have stopped doing options, and I think architects also need to do that. So once you get out of here into the profession, and if you're getting a project which is talking about rehab and sale, keep rehab and sale aside. Think of humans. We are all the same. Everybody is going to get a house. The moment you look at it as housing humans, then you don't differentiate between the rehab and the sale. And once you do that, your entire project also gets a lot of mileage because the values remain constant for the entire scheme. If I have a rehab building next to the sale, I cannot demand something more than what I would like to have for the sale building. A rehab which looks like a rehab, well, that's what I'm saying. And business sense is when you have repetition. You know that for the first 20 units, you may get 4% fee. For the balanced units, you may get 0.25%. So the more the options, the more the fees. Think on those lines. I hope Dr. Ripudaman Singh some direction for your students.
Yes, he has put a message saying thank you.
Yes, so the next question is for Ruturaj. So what role does community participation play in shaping long-term public infrastructure, and how can architects bridge the gap between policymakers and citizens?
So, we are not a planning practice. We are more of an urban design practice. Our experience with, especially in the context of the project that I shared, has been that when you, in a city kind of situation, when you say stakeholders, everybody shows up, right? I mean, in this small sort of in this mobility plan, you had the corporation, the smart cities mission, the panchayats, the traffic police and their committees, the urban transport organizations, private early appointed consultants to the government, the state government itself, who were funding it in part, and the central government, representatives of the central government who were again funding it in part. So building a consensus sometimes is not what we found an approach that as consultants we can lead. Building a consensus in this case, in our case, was that idea was led by a very good IAS officer who was in charge of this project. We were one of the many agencies who were contributing to the plan. However, at the time, opinions and ideas wherever relevant, because you have to be very mindful when people, when you ask people of opinion, they will certainly volunteer one. Nobody says that, oh, I have no opinion about this. Everybody wants to say something. So it would be our role also to kind of sieve through. First of all, to seek feedback in a formal and organized manner. Otherwise, these meetings, initially, when we used to sit through them, used to be really chaotic. Then we started to kind of devise formats in which we pose the questions that, what do you think? And then they respond. So we control to an extent the feedback that we need. Two, we seek feedback from people who have expertise or relevance or stake on that particular issue. So for um, the vehicle, for example, there are three different sizes of buses. They all have different turning radii, etc. Certain sizes of buses cannot be run on certain routes because they don't have turning radius in old city and in the heart of the city. So all that feedback came from the traffic department, the traffic police who actually run the traffic in the city. They had a lot of feedback on that. The color scheme, the graphics, that the feedback for that came from a very different focus group, which included the planning commission of the city and stuff like that. So but what our role is to create formats in which we want the feedback, and to run the meetings where we are seeking feedback. So somehow, once if you lose that position, then people start commenting on things that is not really their domain of expertise or interest, or in fact they don't have any stake in that. So that also becomes an issue. And for public consultation, because this is also a public funded project, so you need public consultation meetings. We don't lead them. I have kind of realized through our work, not only in this project but in other projects where we engage with rural communities or stakeholders in that marketplace and all, that we need somebody as an intermediary who can liaise with us and understand our worldview and point of view and our expertise, and effectively communicate it to people who do not necessarily speak in the same language as we do. Because to build an ability to communicate a project to a lot of people, especially, need people like IAS officers, politicians. In fact, in this particular case, there was a very interested ward member or council member from this city council who took it on himself to go to particular vendors who refused to have the bus stop in front of their establishment because they thought that it will block their access to the footpath. It will reduce them. So there are all kinds of issues, objections that people raise, and you cannot force it down. Obviously, a city. The schemes that generally work like that also have a large possibility of failure. So somehow we have to find people who negotiate between us and the stakeholders as well. And we were a bit lucky in that sense because we had a few officers, a few local politicians who were very interested in getting this done. And they helped us along, including some people in the village panchayats through which these buses used to move. But we don't attempt to skip that process. Also, we don't try to go directly to people because I don't see that as professionals we have the language. It takes time to develop, right? And I have to be in that location in the grassroots for a very long time to have that connection with the people who get impacted by these schemes. So we are always trying to look for somebody who helps us bridge that. And generally this somebody is, like I said, some individual, or in some cases an NGO or a organization that is working in that context for a long time. Once we have those people, then it becomes easier. it helps. And but first, then we have to sell our worldview to them, and only if they get convinced that they can effectively communicate on the other side. So yes, so those are the kind of. But I don't attempt really, frankly, to go directly and engage with people at the grassroots in our schemes, because I find that quite counterproductive. And sometimes if you lose, even if you have well-meaning, you lose the because we are not simply effective in communicating. You lose the ground, in doing so. So yeah, it needs a little bit of moderation.
Thank you, sir. So yeah, it's already 12:30. So any more additional questions if we have after this, we'll be mailing it to the speakers, and you can maybe get back over the week. Yeah. Thank you so much to all our participants for this wonderful questions, and to our speakers for your thoughtful and generous responses. It's been inspiring to hear how both of you weave together ideas of gender realities in urban design. With that, I would like to hand it back to Ramya for the closing.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, Harshit ji and Ruturaj ji, and every student, faculty member, and institution joining us today. We are deeply grateful to our speakers for unpacking how architecture, urban design can serve as powerful tools for social equity. Your insights reminded us that affordable design is not a compromise. It's also about dignity, context, shared responsibility. So a very special thank you to our institutional partners, our collaboration team at Train Matter, and everyone working behind the scenes to make this session seamless. May today's dialogue inspire both imagination and actionable responsibility in your studios and practices. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Sense and Sensibility session.